Welcome to the Appalachian Wellness Connection. Join myself, Dr. Kevin Britt, and my good friend Dr. Micheal Bryan as we guide you through natural solutions for better health and lasting wellness. From chiropractic care to functional healing, we're connecting you to the best in holistic health from the heart of East Tennessee.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Appalachian Wellness Connection. This episode, you guys are in for an exciting topic. We're going to be answering the question, is chiropractic just about cracking backs? Is it safe? Do you have to go forever? What's the truth? We're going to be sharing the real science. We're going to be breaking down that chiropractic is way more than just pain relief. It's about whole body brain health.
All right, and so to begin our first podcast, we wanted to talk about what our mission really is and the purpose of this podcast. And so at Appalachian Wellness Connection, our goal is to empower you to make informed health choices that go beyond the conventional. We believe in helping you achieve optimal wellness, not just by alleviating symptoms, but by addressing root causes of your health issues. We're here to share holistic health strategies, the latest in evidence-based care and expert insights, all tailored to the unique health needs of our community here in Northeast Tennessee and beyond. Whether you're seeking alternatives to traditional medical approaches, frustrated with the limitations of standard of care, or someone who simply wants to feel their best, this podcast is for you. Our message is about real results, personal empowerment, and community healing, grounded in Christian values, trust in modern science, and a commitment to serving you. So this episode's about chiropractic. Well, why chiropractic? We are first and foremost chiropractors. Chiropractic is the heart of what we do at our office at Integral Wellness Company. It's about so much more than back pain. It's about a full body approach that promotes healing, recovery, and overall wellness. We're committed to helping you explore all the ways chiropractic can improve your life and health. So in each episode, we're going to discuss the latest in research. We're going to explore topics around wellness that impact our daily lives and feature real-life patient stories that showcase the true power of chiropractic care and holistic wellness.
Yeah, so what better place to start than going back to the very first adjustment? So when we look at the origins of chiropractic care, we have to go back to 1895. A doctor by the name of D.D. Palmer in Davenport, Iowa. The story goes, so in chiropractic school, one of the first classes that we ever had to take was actually chiropractic history. And it's so important to examine where you come from. And so Dr. D.D. Palmer, he was into more alternative things back in the day, like magnetics and healing through, non-traditional modalities and different things like that. You could only imagine, 1895, right? Inside the same office where D.D. worked, there was a janitor by the name of Harvey Lillard. And so they got, to talking and things like that. And he noticed that the janitor, Harvey Lillard, had a really interesting story. He wasn't born deaf, but he had had an accident where something had hit him in the head, and it actually caused him to be deaf after that. And so, as the story goes, Dee was kind of curious, and so what he did was he started, feeling around, of Harvey's neck, and actually felt what he thought was a bone that was misaligned. And so he talked him into, hey, let me see if I can correct this misalignment. And so he did. And lo and behold, the story says that Harvey could actually hear the ticking of a pocket watch for the first time in years. And so from there, D.D., obviously knew that there was something there, and so he started Palmer School of Chiropractic in Davenport. We call that the Fountainhead School. It's where everything started. And so from there, started developing a curriculum, teaching the basic sciences and really understanding what was going on. And unfortunately, this made some people really mad, right? The people that made really mad, we're going to call them the AMA, the American Medical Association. And so the American Medical Association, they wanted everything to be pushed through medical school. And chiropractic is separate and distinct. We don't go to medical school. We actually go to chiropractic school. We have our curriculum, and medical doctors have their curriculum, very, very similar. In fact, you can actually go on to Google right now and type in chiropractic DC for Doctor of Chiropractic, DC degree versus MD degree. And you can click on Google Images and it'll actually give you a breakdown. So the classes are very similar. Oftentimes there's just subtle differences. Like, for example, chiropractors usually have more radiology classes, where medical doctors generally have more classes in like chemistry because of the pharmaceutical drugs and things like that they're going to recommend. So they're just a little bit different in how they break that down. And so early on, the American Medical Association started with smear campaigns. And so, with commercials and smear campaigns to basically try to get the public away from chiropractic, they went after chiropractors, saying that they were practicing medicine without a license. And actually, chiropractors were jailed for this. And so the most famous chiropractor that we know, we've all heard the story of Herbert Reaver. The stories, he was in Ohio. He was arrested more than 12 times. And he was actually jailed several times because of that. But it was because his refusal to sacrifice for what he believed in at the end of the day, kept pursuing. And there was a lot of chiropractors that actually went to jail as well, but through just the pursuit of what they believed in, ultimately, kept practicing. And so what I want Dr. Kevin to talk about now is the Wilkes versus the AMA trial. So this was in the 70s and 80s, and we can call this a fight for legitimacy, ultimately.
Yeah, so just to, piggyback on that, Herbert Reaver is the most famous jailed chiropractor, but I believe the numbers are somewhere to 600 to 700 chiropractors went to jail for quote-unquote practicing medicine without a license. So luckily, they kept pushing forward, and it came to a head in the Wilk versus AMA trial. So the American Medical Association, since the 60s, had been actively working to eliminate chiropractic. They actually created something called the Committee on Quackery. And so it wasn't just chiropractic. They were trying to get rid of everything that wasn't medicine. And they were discouraging medical doctors from referring patients to chiropractors. And they were actively running smear campaigns that involved, even in school, handing out pamphlets and giving classes to students and to doctors, saying, you cannot, and they even you cannot refer to chiropractors and other alternative health practitioners. And they actually went to the point that they threatened to pull licenses of medical doctors if they referred to chiropractors. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, and so I think this is the route where oftentimes I think things have gotten a lot better now. We don't really run into this issue a lot, but some of our mentors back in the day when they first started practicing, there was this major tension between medical doctors, medical providers, and chiropractors. We don't really see that now. I mean, more than ever. I mean, we take care of a ton of patients in the medical field. But I think when we go back and look for the roots of where this animosity kind of come from, it ultimately come from this AMA back in the day.
Yeah, and luckily, Dr. Chester Wilk and a couple other chiropractors, they sued the AMA for conspiring to destroy chiropractic. And after a long legal battle that went back and forth, in 1987, the court finally ruled that the AMA was guilty of illegal anti-competitive behavior against chiropractic, and they were forced to stand down. And to this day, that's opened up the communication essentially between chiropractors and medical doctors. And I can personally say that we've worked with medical doctors, we've co-managed people together, and it's such a better situation now than it was back then, and the outcomes for patients are just so much better when you don't have animosity between different practitioners that you're going to, and it's so much better than it used to be. And like Dr. Mike said, I have mentors that were chiropractors back then, and they said it was pretty nasty. And so we've come a long way since then, and it's just been getting better and better and better.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but did it not go all the way to the Supreme Court, right?
The Supreme Court, I don't think it went to them. They refused to hear it because they weren't going to go against what I forget if it was the district court. I don't remember the exact details, but the AMA tried to get it to the Supreme Court, but they didn't even hear it.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember going back and studying these things and looking, but when the chiropractors, the Wilkes side, actually won the trial, there was actually a major settlement, they were going to settle for, millions and millions of dollars. You can imagine how much money the AMA, how much money they had that they could settle for. But, Wilkes and the chiropractors, they didn't want their money. They settled for zero money. They settled they made the AMA actually send out letters apologizing to the chiropractors and basically saying, hey, look, we were wrong in this whole thing, right? They weren't after money. They just wanted to be able to practice a profession that they believed in at the end of the day, which I thought that was really cool. You can really see the heart of the Wilkes side in that trial, which is cool.
Yeah, so that's when we tell that story to patients and to people who don't know about it, it's definitely eye-opening. No one truly understands the animosity that used to exist between the professions. And like I said earlier, thank God it doesn't, that animosity is getting better and better and better, and has for many decades now because of that trial. And so when people realize just how much chiropractic has been through, it really validates it. Including talking about validation, let's get into a little bit more about the science behind chiropractic, because chiropractic is there is a distinct science to it, and it's working with the body because we work with the nervous system. And that's really when we get into the power of what chiropractic does for people. So let's break this thing down into a really basic level of understanding. So we're gonna take this thing, really fundamental, like 6th grade, 7th grade biology, and then we're going to kind of expand this into more and more complicated aspects. And really, what's cool is science is constantly evolving, and ultimately, what we think is truth in one period of time, oftentimes we discover that there's more to that. It's not that that's inherently wrong, but there's actually more to that. And so, if we just look at the basic biology of the nervous system, we all know that the brain controls and coordinates every function in the body. It does so through the spinal cord and then throughout the nerves. And we know that the nerves are going to go to all the vital organs, the tissues, every cell in our body. Those nerves are going to ultimately be under control of, essentially. And so that's how the brain is ultimately connected to the body. We then look back at that delicate system and say, man, this really has got to be protected because this is so delicate, it's so important, it's our most vital organ system. And so we have bone encasing that central nervous system. So we have our skull that ultimately protects our brain, and we have our spine that's ultimately going to protect our spinal cord and the nerve roots where they come out to become nerves ultimately. And so oftentimes, we're taught that, the bones misalign and they put pressure on the nerves, and that can cause dysfunction, go into our organ systems, and we can see these different symptoms. Of course, it can cause pain, right? Pressure on those nerves, pain, numbness, and tingling, those kind of things are certainly going to be the case, right? We call that subluxation. And so subluxation, the original thought was when that bone misaligns and puts pressure on the nerves, that's going to cause dysfunction to that organ system. And so I like to think about the brain communicating downwardly to that organ system. It gets to the spine where that subluxation, that misalignment is, and that's going to cause some level of interference to that system. And that's certainly the case. We see that all the time. But with modern research, Dr. Kevin's going to talk about in a little while, researchers such as Heidi Havik, which we're going to talk about in a little while, they've really started to understand that, this subluxation
is not causing as much of an impact from the brain going down to the rest of the body, but rather the opposite. The brain has to receive data to then be able to interpret that data and make a response. Researchers have actually discovered that there's a lot more nerves that go up to the brain versus from the brain going down. And so if we think about this superhighway of information, going northbound and southbound, we could look at that and say 50-50, but researchers actually show that it's probably more like 90-10, meaning 90% of the nerves in the body are actually going to go up to the brain, carrying information from the body to the brain, way more, 90%, and then assimilating that information. And in that 10%, that controlled information is going to then come down ultimately to the body. And so we can talk about, if you want to get into Heidi's work, and we can also talk about, what chronic stress is going to do to the system as well. Now that we understand that this is more of a body to brain relationship, arguably, than necessarily a brain to body, we can look at some of the stressors that we go through on a daily basis too, and how that's going to affect us.
Yeah, so that was definitely, like Dr. Mike said, it was a sixth grade explaining of it. And maybe in another podcast we'll get into some more of the in-depth understanding about what's actually going on in the nervous system, and because it can be pretty fascinating, even if we can nerd out a little bit on it. But Heidi Havik she's out of New Zealand. She's a chiropractor out of New Zealand who's doing, not even arguably, she's doing the single best research on chiropractic care in the world today. And she actually just came out with a paper not long ago, November 7th, 2024, in the Journal of Brain Science. So this is a reputable peer-reviewed journal, and the study's called Neuroplastic Responses to Chiropractic Care, Broad Impacts on Pain, Mood, Sleep, and Quality of Life. So she's showing that the chiropractic adjustment doesn't just affect pain, like we talked about. It's actually affecting neuroplasticity. And what neuroplasticity is it's the nervous system's ability to change to input, to change to stress. It's, we always use the old school thinking of our brain was you're born with, X number of brain cells, and when you lose them, that's when you start to deteriorate. But we know that's not true. Our brain is constantly making new connections between all the different brain cells, and that's what neuroplasticity is. It's our body's ability to adapt and change, both for the better and sometimes for the worse. So this study that, like I said, came out at the end of last year, it evaluated the underlying neurophysiologic mechanisms of chiropractic care using a multifaceted approach, recording behavioral, subjective, and neurophysiological data. So they weren't just asking the people, how do you feel? That was part of it. But they were actually measuring a lot of different things. One of them, they were measuring the EEG, which is brain waves. They were measuring somatosensory evoked potential. So they were seeing how the nerves were functioning. They were looking at clinical health assessments using things like a simple as a Fitbit, looking at heart rate and heart rate variability and things like that. And then they were also using what's called a Promise 29, which is a patient-reported outcomes measurement information system, which is really just a survey of seeing how they were doing. And so these people, they took 76 people with chronic low back pain, and they were randomized into a chiropractic group and then into a control group. The chiropractic care group was 4 weeks of approximately 3 visits per week of chiropractic adjustments to the spine or pelvis as identified as being subluxated, so meaning they adjusted where they found those subluxations. And the control group, they had regular care otherwise, so they were prescribed by non-chiropractic health providers, including self-management advice, pain drugs, physical therapy, and even a referral to a pain clinic. So with the EEG, they're measuring actual brain waves, and they're seeing how subluxation or adjustments can change those brain waves. And we can get into the nitty gritty of this article one day maybe, but I just wanted to hit some of the key points. And it shows that many of the health benefits of chiropractic care are actually due to altered brain activity. The results they further our understanding of the multifaceted impacts of chiropractic care on various health parameters, as well as improving our understanding of the mechanisms for these changes. And this study suggests that chiropractic care alters a person's narrative sense of self that can enable the person to think, feel, and function better. So it's showing that it's, again, way more than pain relief. Chiropractic care is positively affecting the neuroplasticity of the brain and how the person can perceive their environment and how the person can handle stress on a day-to-day basis, even past chronic low back pain. So that study came out just last year, and it's absolutely fascinating when you really read into the nitty-gritty of it, and it's showing that it's going to reduce your fight or flight response, your stress response, which is ultimately going to help improve your sleep, your anxiety, your overall resilience to stress. And that's a study that should be, in my opinion, should be plastered all over mainstream media, but we know that's not going to happen anytime soon. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think, one of the things I was looking at is I was curious about Heidi's work. And so, she's been doing this for several decades, and just her alone, she has published 65 studies to date, which is really, really cool. But something Dr. Kevin was talking about that I want to kind of break down, I think this is really fascinating to kind of think about, and let's connect this dot here, is we were talking about this concept of neuroplasticity. And so Dr. Kevin mentioned sometimes, this can be good and sometimes it can be bad. And it's really, what are we feeding our brain ultimately at the end of the day that's going to allow it to either adapt for bad or ultimately for good. And so when we look at this world that we live in, where we have arguably more stress than ever, we look at physical stress, more so with people, having sitting jobs and not moving enough. We look at the chemicals that are in our food and the chemicals that we're exposed to, with industry. And it's just cheaper to put chemicals and enhance the flavor as opposed to actually put, herbs and spices in there. It costs more money, so we do it cheaper, but, there's more chemicals in it and things like that, right? And all those things are important, but probably the biggest one is actually our emotional stress and the emotional, mental stress of just everyday life. And so, when we were talking about that prefrontal cortex, I guess we're probably going to, geek out here a little bit and go off topic a little bit. But, our prefrontal cortex is oftentimes looked at as our executive brain. So it's what is responsible for things like our decision making or our more complicated task. I always joke and tell people, you never see a cow driving a tractor, right? You never see a squirrel doing calculus, right? Because they don't have those prefrontal cortex like we do. But like Dr. Kevin was alluding to, what they showed in that study was our impact of stress. When we're under stress, that actually suppresses our prefrontal cortex. So something when we look at our prefrontal cortex and we look at our emotional control, or we look at that decision-making ability, when we're under stress, that's going to negatively impact our ability to do those tasks at the end of the day. And so what that does is that reduces the function of the prefrontal cortex and actually starts to inhibit it, and actually starts to allow the the side of the brain, the amygdala and our temporal lobe, which is like our fight or flight, our worst case scenario, our panic, that part of the brain starts to really thrive. The prefrontal cortex, its job is to inhibit those other parts of the brain. Its job is to say no. It's the gatekeeper. And so when that part of our brain actually is suppressed or inhibited, a lack of emotional control, we look at fear is probably the number one emotion that most people are going to deal with. Resentment. We look at all these negative emotions. All of those things are going to be taken hold because the prefrontal cortex is not doing its job. And so what's cool about chiropractic is in that study, you could clearly see the impacts of the prefrontal cortex, our most executive part of our brain. And so if we're trying to overcome things like anxiety, The only way you're going to be able to overcome anxiety is if you get that more executive prefrontal cortex fired up, so it's going to then say, hey, amygdala, stop firing. We don't have to be worst case scenario. This is, we can be happy. We can be focused. We don't have to look at everything as worst case scenario. And so when we get adjusted, that's going to make us more resistant to those stressors. And so if we look at an example, maybe like exercise, right? So let's just say we first start exercising. Before we start exercising, and we work a day shift, we get really tired at the end of the day. Well, then we start exercising. We can do that day shift, and it's really easy because our body becomes more resilient. The more that we get adjusted, the more we stimulate, the more executive parts of the brain, the more endurance we're going to be able to have to inhibit that sympathetic fight or flight, worst case scenario type functions ultimately in the body. And so that kind of leads us maybe to the next topic. Oftentimes, here's a question, Dr. Kevin, is chiropractic just for back pain? We get that all the time.
Well, I think this entire podcast has been about the fact that that's not true. From the very first chiropractic patient restoring their healing to the research that's now coming out just, in the past couple months, it's all showing and proving that it's not just about low back pain, even though I think it's 70% of all patients who seek out chiropractic is for low back pain. So that's really the message that we wanted to get out today, was that no, it's not just about low back pain. Is chiropractic probably the single best thing for low back pain? Yeah, it probably is. And the research tends to bear that out. But no, it's way more. And I just wanted to quick touch on, let's go back to the beginning where D.D. Palmer, he restored Harvey Lillard's hearing. And the first thing he thought was, oh, I found the cure for hearing. So he started advertising out across the country. Come to Davenport, Iowa, I found the cure for hearing. And obviously that didn't quite pan out the way he thought it would. But what he noticed was that people's chronic pain syndromes were going away. People's heart conditions were going away. People's digestive issues were going away. And that's how he with his, I don't know if it was rudimentary or his investigation into human health and how the body worked, that's how D.D. Palmer figured out that it was about the nervous system. And that's what chiropractic's about. It's not about low back pain. It's about the nervous system. But if we restore proper functioning communication of the nervous system and help the nervous system get into a more relaxed state, then you can heal. So yes, you're going to heal from low back pain, but your body can heal from many other issues as well as low back pain.
Yeah, and so, to kind of piggyback on that too, we've got this analogy that we always use in the office when we're talking about chiropractic for back pain. If we look at most of the nerves in the body, let's just say that some of those nerves are function nerves and some of those nerves are sensation, like pain-based nerves. Less than 8% of the nerves in our body are actually pain-based nerves. That means that roughly 92% of the nerves in our body are doing other things. Things like our digestive system, things like keeping our immune system strong. So we always joke and say, if you get adjusted just for pain, that's like buying the most expensive brand new iPhone just to use its calculator. Can you do it? Yeah. Does it make sense? Not really. It's probably better ways to do it, right? So when we get adjusted, at the end of the day, it's for our brain, not just for pain. So question number 2, man, I don't want to get adjusted or start getting adjusted because you have to keep getting adjusted forever.
You don't have to do anything. You can do whatever you want to do. And that's how I always communicate to patients who bring that up. And I've actually run into a few other chiropractors who don't like this analogy, but I think it makes perfect sense. Do you have to eat healthy forever if you want to be healthy? Do you have to exercise? Do you have to get good quality sleep? Do you have to, if it's something that's going to be beneficial for you, you should want to do it. Do you have to do it? No, you can go out and, eat all the fast food you want and all the prepackaged foods and sit around all day watching Netflix. But are you going to get the best outcomes? Are you going to be healthy? Is your body going to be in its optimal state of wellness and you're going to be able to live your life the way you want it to? Highly unlikely. So when people ask, do I have to come forever? You don't have to do anything you don't want to. Is it going to be beneficial for you? 100%.
Yeah, it's like, how many years do you want your brain to work right?
Yeah.
Simple enough.
And we're seeing that epidemic across the country. And again, we'll get into that in another episode, but Alzheimer's, dementia, all those things they're running rampant. And it's because people aren't taking proper care of themselves from an early stage in life.
1 in 5, I think it is right now. I think it's 1 in 5 women. I think is where that statistic is right now.
Terrifying.
Yeah. So next question is, chiropractic is dangerous.
Sure, it's always dangerous. No, chiropractic is not dangerous. There have been horror stories that come out, and if anybody wants to hear more about one of them, we can go over it and what's probably actually happened in them. But study after study after study. There's a study out of, I believe it was out of Canada, with millions of patients. It was essentially a meta-analysis showing that you are no more likely to suffer any sort of issue from a chiropractor as you are from walking into a medical doctor, as you are from walking into a hair salon. Chiropractic is as safe as anything, and one of the best ways is to look at insurance. How much malpractice insurance do you have to carry? And for medical doctors, it's substantially more. I don't know what the numbers are. Obviously, it depends on what your specialty is. But for a chiropractor, across the country, it depends on what state you're in and depends on how much stuff you do in the office. But it averages somewhere between, $1,200 to $2,500 a year. When a medical doctor is going to be, I'd say the lowest is probably $10,000 a year. And I believe anesthesiologists are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars just for insurance.
Yeah, so I just did a quick Google search of these things, and this is just what popped up. So I know mine and Dr. Kevin, we pay about, I think mine's $1,800, something like that a year.
Yep.
$150, a month, something like that, $1,800. Looking at like OBGYNs, this thing says, your average in Miami, Florida is $50,000 to $100,000. You look at Washington, D.C., premiums are as high as $120,000. So, $120,000 for the premium, you can, look at that level of risk versus $1,800 a year and look at that amount of risk at the end of the day. These insurance companies, they don't lose money. They know what the statistics are. It's really clear when you look at it objectively through that.
Yeah, insurance companies don't care what you're practicing, what you're doing. They're looking purely at the numbers.
And the risk.
And the risk, and that's what they're going off of. So that typically speaks for itself.
Yeah, no, 100%. I always use this analogy because the thing that comes up with chiropractic, the scary thing is oftentimes strokes, right? And so I always use this analogy when it comes to strokes. And so let's just say you're driving down the road and you see a house on fire and you see this big red truck, it's blinking, you see all these people getting out, and you go another year and you see another house on fire and you see that same red truck in front of that house fire, and you jump to conclusions and you say, I know what's going on there. That fire truck is causing all the fires in my community. We're going to have to stop that fire truck, right? We could look at that and say, well, they're correlated. It must be causation. But that doesn't mean anything. The reality of it is, when we look at the number one symptom of a stroke, when somebody's having neck pain, that's the second most common reason that someone's even going to go to a chiropractor. So chiropractor is going to be associated with strokes, no, for sure. The same thing as in the summertime, swimming in the lake is associated with ice cream, right? And then we look at drownings are associated with ice cream. It doesn't mean that ice cream causes drowning. It's people drowned when they're in the lake in the summertime because they don't swim in the winter, and they usually eat ice cream in the summer. So there's a correlation there, but that correlation does not mean causation at the end of the day. Another common thing that we get a lot is there's no science and there's no research. This one, I'm going to actually handle this one because this one's really frustrating, because most of the time, when we hear things like there's no research behind that, generally what that means is whoever's making any of those claims, whether it's against chiropractic, whether it's against a supplement, whether it's against vaccines, or it doesn't really matter what it is. What that means is a person making those claims They've never spent any time in the research. We get this all the time with things like, laser therapy. And I think if you go to PubMed, there's 14,000 studies, on the benefits of that. The reality when someone says that 9 times out of 10 means that they've never actually even attempted to look up the research at the end of the day. So just be curious or cautious if anybody says, well, there's no research behind this. 9 times out of 10, what that really means is they've not looked into it. And so it's just this, basis claim. But you can get so much research, on PubMed nowadays with almost anything. Chiropractic's no exception. Just Heidi alone has done 65, studies showing the effectiveness, of chiropractic on subluxation and things like that.
Yeah, and if we want to go back into the history of chiropractic with B.J. Palmer, who is D.D. Palmer's son, he's single-handedly took the profession and expanded it more than anybody to this day. And he did so much research; he was obsessed with it. And he took over. He bought psych wards.
The Clearview.
Clearview Psych Ward, and started doing chiropractic on the patients that would come in there, and they had to shut the place down because they weren't getting enough patients and they were releasing too many people. Again, that's not just chiropractic. He also had control over what they were eating and how they were moving and doing all those other important things when it comes to your health. But there's more research, whether some would say it's anecdotal or observational. It's the profession has been the second largest healthcare profession for whatever it is, 130 years now, and it's still going strong, if not stronger than ever. And the research is continually just getting better and better and backing up more and more of what chiropractors have had to say for the past century plus.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting thing to think about going back. What would happen if we got chiropractic into those places, if we prioritize these patients with good nutrition, we got them on an exercise routine, we started having these healthy habits, something as simple as drinking water and cutting out the sodas and the Cokes and the ice cream and all the things that we give these patients to satisfy them. What if we took control over that situation and said, hey, look, we know that the body responds really well to these things. Let's prioritize getting healthy from the inside out versus the outside in. I think that's a topic for another day. Our medical system makes most of their money on treating illness, not curing it, right? So when there's a cure, there's no money to be made. Most of the money's made when you're just sick enough that you can keep buying the medication at the end of the day, right? If I had a hotel, I wouldn't make any money if nobody stayed there, right? And so there's incentive to keep people on those products, pharmaceutical drugs, those type things, right? So that is an interesting topic, probably a deep rabbit hole worth of conversation. That we'll have to do on another day at the end of the day. But what we want to do at this point is just maybe look at a few things that we see, in our office and in chiropractic, sees in general too. So the first one that kind of comes to my mind is, different neuropathies and nerve and spinal related things. So, I found this really interesting. When you look at studies where they take a mouse and they need to give that mouse a disc issue, whether that's a disc bulge or a disc herniation, what they do is they go in there and basically either fuse the bone below and the bone above, or they just restrict its motion. And so when they restrict its motion, that forces that disc out to the side to make contact with those nerves, to cause, the sciatica and things like that in a controlled clinical, for the studies for the mouse and things like that, right? And so when we just reverse engineer that, what could be a potential strategy to help with that? Get motion into the spine, right? So if we get motion into those joints, the body can take care of itself. I remember reading that they said over 50% of disc issues will spontaneously reabsorb, meaning that they come back into the disc if the proper conditions are met. Get motion back in the spine, and that's what chiropractic is known for.
Yeah, and I should have had the study ready, but a lot of people come in and say, oh, I think I have a bulging disc, and they automatically think that that's what's causing their problem. And I know I've seen the study where they took I believe it was about 100 asymptomatic people. So these people had no low back pain, no issues, no headaches, no neck pain, nothing. And they ran an MRI on them, and they found that upwards of 75 to 80% of them had a bulging disc somewhere along their spine, if not more than one. And then they followed those people, again, asymptomatic, and they re-MRI'd them at a later time, and the same amount had bulging discs, but they were different people, different places. Other ones that they found months later had resorbed. So your body is constantly trying to heal itself and work on itself, and what it wants is, like we said, motion, proper nutrition, proper communication. And when we can help people understand that, help hold their hand through that process, they will get better if you give it enough time and enough consistency.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Obviously, the most common things that come into a chiropractic office are going to be, pain-related things, whether that's, low back pain is probably number one, followed by neck pain, mid-back pain, hip pain, that kind of thing. But in a greater context, what we've been talking about this entire time is way more than that. One of the things that I see all the time, because in the office I'm doing a lot of the re-exam, visits, is I would say 70-80% of people within 3 months of care, if they're consistent, will check that box where there's less anxiety, less depression. And at the end of the day, that goes back to when our spine is healthy, that allows our prefrontal cortex to operate like it's supposed to, and we can take control over our state. That anxiety and depression, that's a secondary issue to our brain not suppressing that. We are made to be overcomers, but when our brain is not working right, we start to become more victim mindset as opposed to that overcomer type mentality at the end of the day. And so one of the things that we can touch on here, and it may go back to the common questions, is sometimes people have heard that chiropractic can help with all kinds of things, right? You have patients said, I went to a chiropractor and my hearing got better. We've seen that, in our practice several times, kind of thing. You've got the classic female that's been trying to get pregnant, for years and years and years, and she starts chiropractic care, and the next thing you know, everybody's celebrating, because they're going to have a baby, right? We see those types of things. We see eyesight improving. We see digestive systems improving. And we have to ask the question, well, maybe why is that? If we go back, we know that the brain controls everything. The brain's the mechanism that's primarily there to stimulate the brain is motion of the spine. That was a Nobel Prize. Roger Sperry discovered that. So when you start tuning up that brain, tuning up the nervous system, you can see all kinds of things get better. Does that mean that every single person that's struggling with infertility is going to get better when they come in? It doesn't. Does it mean that everybody that has ring in the ear or ear issues or deafness is going to get better? It doesn't. But when you look at millions of chiropractic offices, or just thousands of patients that we've taken care of in our career, we've seen improvements with all of those things, and it's the uniqueness of the individual. But at the end of the day, our focus is how do we get the brain healthier? And if we can get the brain healthier, it can overcome a lot of these things. And so we're not saying we are treating depression. We're not saying we're treating this infertility. What we're doing is helping your body perform at a higher level, and at a higher level of your brain, that's going to mean a higher level of healing ability and a higher potential that you're going to be able to operate at and express at. And so oftentimes those things get better. Just like if somebody has, back issues and they start exercising and start losing weight. They didn't exercise and lose weight to treat the low back pain. They're just trying to get healthier, but because they got healthier, those things got better on their own. If we focus on the master system of the body, which is the nervous system, the most integral system we have, we tune that up, a lot of things can get better. And that's what's really cool about our job. But on the flip side, kind of the difficult part about our job, because not every single person that has deafness and these issues are going to get better. Our job is not to treat that. Our job is to help them get healthier, predominantly in their nervous system.
Yeah, and if you came in the office and you shadowed in the office and you just watched mainly the adjustment side of it, you wouldn't be able to tell what each individual patient was coming in for. The adjustment, the technique, the style, you can go to any office in the entire world, and maybe not any office, but most offices, you wouldn't be able to tell, oh, that person's there for headaches, oh, that person's there for low back pain, oh, that person's there for infertility, because that's not how chiropractic works. We're not treating the condition, we're taking care of the person, we're taking care of their nervous system and the communication along that nervous system. And to piggyback on that, especially the infertility thing, every office that I've worked in, every office that I've shadowed, every office that I've interned in, there's at least one, if not multiple cases of a woman or a couple that came in, some for that reason because they heard the story, but a lot of them for other issues, for low back pain, for a sports injury, whatever, and they were at the same time struggling to get pregnant, and they got pregnant, and the only thing that they changed was undergoing chiropractic care. But it's because we're not addressing infertility, we're not addressing low back pain, we're not addressing migraine headaches or whatever it may be. We're addressing the communication between the brain and the body back to the brain. When that is restored, the nervous system can take back control and do what it knows it's supposed to do, which is keep you as healthy and high functioning as possible.
Absolutely. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode on chiropractic. We're excited to bring you guys more and more topics. We hope you enjoyed everything. We're excited to bring the next one. We hope you have a great day, and God bless.